the head doctor in that ICU said that, I'm sorry, but he's just not going to make it because it's just too far gone.
Right.
He's going to be a vegetable. If he
Right.
comes through this,
Right.
he will be in a vegetated state.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't want to be that way. You wouldn't want him to be that way. And he's never going to walk.
Yeah.
He's never going to talk.
He'll never talk again.
And he's not going to know who you are.
Right. Right.
And I just said to the doctor, thank you so much for being so candid with me.
Right.
I appreciate what you're telling me.
Right.
But I'm going to decline that.
Right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jini Thornton, and I am super excited to welcome you back to another episode of the Thank Me Later show with me, your host, Jini Thornton, where we help you master your money and transform your life. So today, y'all, our mastery and transformation, we're focused on unexpected family tragedies today. Okay. And I'm super excited to welcome back a friend, a personal friend and a friend of Thank Me Later, who is not just a yoga guru and a wellness guru, but had a very interesting, kind of crazy situation back in 2022. And because we're friends, I kind of had a front row seat to what Mechelle Davis had going on. Hello, Mechelle, and welcome back.
Thank you so much.
I'm happy that you're here. So I want to share with a little bit about who you are before we jump into your story about you and your son, Tony, and the illness that he had back in 2022. I need folk to know who you are and how to get in touch with you. But Mechelle Davis is a highly respected spiritual wellness coach and certified yoga therapist. With over 18 years of experience, Mechelle has owned and operated the Yoga Hive Healing Art Studio, one of a few African-American owned and operated yoga studios in South Atlanta, where she has served the community since 2006. So you can certainly engage with the Yoga Hive Studio at yogahive.com. You can follow them on Instagram at Yoga Hive Studio. And I have been working with Mechelle over 10 years now. And that really leads me to why we're here together today. First, I want to say thank you for sharing this story.
Thank you.
Because I know, I know it's very personal and intimate. I know you said this is the first time that you've kind of publicly talked about your 38-year-old son at the time, back in 2022, Tony, who had a massive stroke. Massive stroke. So I'd like for you to just kind of paint the picture. I have a ton of questions for you.
Okay.
And first of all, thank you for sharing not just the story, but your journey with me. Because, obviously talking to you, Tony was sick in California. And so I was able to come visit you all in California. So just thank you for giving me that opportunity to learn.
Yes.
And to be able to support you through a really, really challenging, trying time.
I'm grateful.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful too. I'm really grateful. So if you could just kind of, lay the story out for us so people understand what happened with Tony.
Okay. Well, I'll take it from the top as I know it.
Right.
It was just a normal, we actually had a corporate retreat with your employees that weekend.
Right.
I had been talking to my son. We talk quite often.
Right.
He was going to do some, he does, Premiere, video editing and different things like that.
Right.
So he was talking to me about some few things that I was going to, he does a lot with his church.
Right.
And so he's heavily involved with his church doing the video cameras and different things. And I would help him out sometimes with some things he was creating.
Right.
And so we had planned on getting together that Saturday, and we were out at the retreat. And I said, well, I'll call you back. He was working. And I said, I'll call you. Let's talk at 11 o'clock at night, p.m. And so he's in California, by the way, so of course, time difference. And I didn't hear from him. I called him. As soon as I left the retreat, I was calling him. Didn't get him. No big deal.
Right.
When I call any of my sons, if they don't answer, they might be busy. I don't think anything.
Just keep it moving.
You just keep it moving.
Right.
And so after a while, if so many hours go by and I hadn't heard anything, what I usually do with all of them, I send a set of eyes.
Right. I'm looking for you. Right.
I just put eyes in the
mommy
text,
eyes. Yep.
And so usually that will get me a response.
Right.
I didn't get a response, but still no big deal.
Sure.
Sunday came and went. I reached out a couple of times. I even asked his brother, have you talked to Tony?
Right.
They said no. And so I figured, I know he did photography and, stays pretty busy. And he worked at the casino. So I was like, yeah, he's probably, just busy.
Right.
So I didn't worry about it. No thoughts going whatsoever. And so then by Monday, I sent eyes again. I'm thinking, okay, now I should have gotten some feedback.
Absolutely.
You can take a second here.
Right.
And so
how many mothers do you have?
How many mothers do you have?
Absolutely.
Exactly. So I didn't hear anything. And so then didn't really, like on my heart, I kept thinking about him.
Right.
More than usual for me. And I was thinking, okay, he keeps coming in my spirit.
Right.
And so then that afternoon, I was on the way home. I talked to one of my other sons, and I asked him, had he talked to Tony? He said, no, he hadn't talked to him. He reached out. He didn't hear anything back. So headed home. It's normal, get home. And so then usually when I leave my office, and then I go home and go in another office.
Right.
I'm still working, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm downstairs, and then I hear my husband upstairs talking on the phone, and still no big deal. But then he was coming down the stairs as he was talking, and then I could kind of hear he was saying like, "Who now? Wait a minute. Yes, that's our son. What's going on?" And I'm thinking, okay, what's happening? Still wasn't thinking anything. But then he was on the phone with someone that was trying to identify him.
They were trying to identify Tony.
Yes. And so the lady was very evasive with why she was really calling, which was kind of alarming, but I'm pretty cool, calm, and collected.
For sure.
So I was like, okay, let me find out what's going on before I jump off into whatever emotions I need to use here.
Right.
And so then he puts it on speakerphone, and so she says, can you describe him? And I'm thinking, lady, this is my son.
Right.
Get to the point of your phone call.
Right.
And so she was telling, and I think privacy.
Right. So did you know if she was at the hospital? Did you know?
She did say that she was calling from a hospital eventually, because I'm like, what is this call in reference to?
Right.
What's going on?
Right.
Just tell me. And she wanted some, like, what does he look like? And I'm thinking, okay, this is crazy.
Right.
So then she tells me he's at the hospital. So she was maybe like the social worker or somebody in the hospital that was making this phone call. Then she put the nurse on the phone.
Okay.
And so then she began to tell me that Tony was in the hospital, since he had been identified by me as the people that they could release this information, because that HIPAA is very serious. It's no joke.
Yes.
So they wasn't just going to, start divulging what was going on. So I talked with the nurse, and she let me know that he had a stroke. He was in a coma.
Okay.
He had a hemorrhagic stroke with a midline brain shift.
So for all of us regular folk, break that down for us. Like, what does that mean? It sounds like a really, really, really bad stroke.
It is a really bad stroke. You have two different types of stroke. You have ischemic stroke and you have a hemorrhagic stroke. And so typically when you have the hemorrhagic stroke, it's one blood fuses in the head, and one is when no blood is going, and the other one is when blood is actually releasing. And so it basically had filled and took one side of the brain, and just basically, because you have no room. I mean, the skull is not going to expand, so it just presses, and that's when people began to lose their feeling, it's talking, mobility, all of that. And so, and his was just the worst that they had seen at that time. Yeah. And so he was in this coma-like state. And so,
and just to interrupt you for 1 second, because I know a lot of times we hear of what a stroke is, but we never think about a stroke for someone who's 38.
Not at all.
38 years old. And so you're thinking like 80s, like 70 and 80-year-old. So at this point, you hear this. You're in Georgia. You're in Atlanta. He's in what part?
California.
He's in California. And so do y'all immediately go into like plane tickets, getting to California? Like what do you do? Because you know that he's in a coma.
Mm-hmm. Well, my first thought, I didn't panic, because see, the good thing when you when you know that this is the best place for him to be if he's had a stroke. I'm not a doctor.
Right.
I can do a lot of things, but
Right.
I'm not a doctor.
Right.
So I was like, okay, great. He's had a stroke. And I do know that when you have a stroke, as quickly as you can get
You need to get to the hospital.
to the hospital and get some care,
Absolutely.
the better it will be for you. And so my first, when she told me that, and I asked the questions, like, okay, he's in ICU, he's in the coma-like state, I want to be able to talk to the doctor. So I went into information mode, actually.
Okay.
I want to be able to know who's the doctor, who's caring for him, what's going on. Give me that information so I can actually talk to them or have them call me.
Right.
Then the next thing was to pray.
Mm.
I have to go to my source
Right.
immediately
Right.
and say, God got this.
Right.
And God got me. Mm-hmm. So I can hear.
Right.
And so I needed to be able to stop, be still, meditate, and gather myself.
Mm. Even with all that going on.
Even with all of that going on.
More importantly, with all that going on, to stop
More
and do that.
importantly, and that's what I tell people. I have I have lots of mantras and saying, but this poem I learned when I was in the 6th grade and used to know the whole thing. But even in the 6th grade, there was just a little portion of this poem that stuck with me and penetrated my heart. And I always kept it with me for life. And it's by Rudyard Kipling, and it says, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and perhaps blaming it on you, the world is yours.
Right.
Now, that poem is a father talking to a son.
Right.
But I just felt like that right there is what I need to live this life in this world.
Right.
And that's the first thing that came to my mind because all of a sudden I got all these thoughts
Right.
pouring in,
Of course.
what to do.
Right.
And that came to me. If you can keep your head. So I said, Mechelle, you need to keep your head
right now.
You need to keep your head.
Right.
And so my husband and I, we prayed and I talked and I said, okay. And he didn't even ask me. He knew. Okay, she's going.
She's leaving. Yeah, there's no question.
There's nothing to discuss here
Right.
about that.
Right.
I immediately got on the phone
Right.
with Delta, got tickets. I got, as they say, the first thing smoking
Right. Out of here.
out of here.
Right.
And I knew that this flight is going to take me 3.5 to 4 hours
To get there.
to get there.
Right.
So how much panic? I just refused to do that to myself.
Right.
Because God is in control and there's nothing else. And even with all the healing work that I do, it's like I'm here in Georgia. My son is in California.
Right.
This is where the power of prayer comes in. This is where the affirmations that I do come in. This is where everything that I know
Right.
to do and be still shows up for me. I just packed.
And you were gone. So you
gone.
get there, you get to California. Obviously, Tony's in the hospital. He's in a coma. And can you give us an idea of just how sick was he? Like, I understand that he was in a coma, but as you're there getting settled, he can't what? He can't talk. He can't walk. He can't what?
Well, when I got there, and went into that room, I was blown away with what my son looked like in that bed. He was so huge. Now, Tony has always been a big boy, big man.
Right.
And he was overweight. And
Right.
he's been on that whole roller coaster ride. I'm losing weight, I'm gaining weight, I'm losing weight, I'm gaining weight thing.
Right.
And I knew he was talking about getting back in the gym and doing this, that, and the other, but he was bigger
Than you had ever seen him?
than I had seen him. And it wasn't just overweight, it was like he was swole. He just looked almost unrecognizable.
Wow.
The size of his feet, the size of his hand, the size of his head, and then all of these tubes, that was going on. And I just walked over there to him and laid my hands on him, and I let him know that I was there. And I could start to see like rapid eye movement.
Right. Acknowledging your presence.
Acknowledging. And so like just my voice
Right.
alone was like, I guess he's like, oh God,
Right. She's here.
am I in trouble? my mom is here, right? I can see the rapid eye movement going
Right.
on.
Right.
And so I just thank God for that response right there. And I just stood there with him and let him know that I'm here with you on this journey. Don't know what this is going to be like, but I'm here.
Right.
And so with that, I prayed with him, talked to him, and he at that point he wasn't really responding other than the eye movement. That was the response that I was getting at that moment.
And that's all he could do.
That's all he could do.
So he couldn't speak, he couldn't move, he couldn't do anything.
He couldn't do anything because he was on a ventilator.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he was actually on a ventilator.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so it was just a scary situation, and I have to back up because the health situation and crisis that he was in was really not a good one. When in 2020 when COVID came through,
right,
he ended up with COVID in December, and he was considered what they call a super spreader because sometimes people felt like, that they didn't have any symptoms, and we didn't know what we know now about COVID, right? And so he didn't have any symptoms, any signs, whatever. He was still working, doing whatever. He's one of these, I'm not going to wear no mask and blah, 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 blah. And so he ended up with COVID, and it was really, really bad. And that was a time when he called me. He was actually sitting in the parking lot to go to work, and he called me like at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I missed the call.
Right.
But some kind of way in my psychic, I felt like I missed the call. My phone wasn't even in the bedroom.
Right.
And I got up and went to my phone and looked, and true enough, I had missed the call.
Right.
And I was like, I wonder why he would be calling me. He knows the time difference.
Time difference, right, of
and
course.
I called him back to see if this was a mistake or did he actually mean to call me. And when I talked to him, he was actually sitting in the car waiting for his shift to start, and he was just fading, because he was, and I was thinking, he was saying that he was sick, and I was like, well, Tony, you should probably go get a test.
Absolutely.
To see if it's COVID. And he was like, well, the job had a hotline where you call and then they ask you a bunch of questions and determine that way. I mean, how silly was that?
Right.
But, oh, no, you're not doing this. No, you don't have COVID. And so he did that a couple of times throughout the days. And I said, no, son, you need to go to a doctor.
Right.
You need to go to the hospital. And so while he was on the phone with me, he was telling me the gauges on the car were starting to go dim. So I knew then either he was losing consciousness,
okay,
or he was like in like when your blood pressure goes way up or something like that. And so I told him he needed to get some Gatorade because I felt like his electrolytes were really, this is what my spirit was telling me.
Right.
So he actually did that. He was able to get some Gatorade and some crackers, and it helped him. He was okay. And he wanted to just lay down. And so I didn't have anybody to call or, where is he?
Right.
Or any of this. And so I prayed. I stayed with him on the phone for hours. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I got to go to work the next day. And then eventually he the next day comes and I said, son, you don't need to go to work. But you know how I got to go to work. Nothing stops me from going to work, right? I was like, son, you need to go to urgent care. So he did. He did listen to me. He went to urgent care, and the next thing you know, urgent care sent him to emergency room, and he was in the hospital with COVID, and they had to give him morphine.
Okay.
Because his blood pressure was over 200 and something.
Wow.
Okay.
Right.
And then he had kidney failure.
Wow.
That's the first time in life that we ever heard of anything going on with him and his kidneys.
Gotcha.
So in 2020...
So all of this, which you're telling all of this...
Yeah, I have to give you that.
Because that all impacted when he had the stroke. And why he was as sick as he was with the stroke.
Because here's the thing. He was on dialysis from 2020 to 2021. His kidneys regained.
Gotcha.
Because they just took a hit from the COVID.
Right.
And then he was off dialysis. But once you come off of something and you regain, you need to maintain. You need to be doing the right thing.
For sure.
He did the right thing for a little bit. And then he started back his same little dance with food and everything else, you know. And then the next thing you know, here we are. And it was too late.
Right.
Because the blood pressure, you cannot walk around with high blood pressure and think that it's okay. And you're going to feel okay. Because that's why they call it the silent killer.
Right.
Because you think everything's cool.
Right. Yeah.
You think taking a little vinegar do it.
Yeah.
And maybe it will bring it down, but that don't need to be the constant recourse.
Right. And I appreciate you sharing that, particularly with Tony only being 38 years old. And again, a lot of people think, that's not going to happen to me. That doesn't apply to me. That only happens to older people.
Yeah.
And that's just not true.
It is not true.
So fast forward us. Now you're in California. Obviously, he's not sick. You realize he's very, very, very sick. So I'm talking to you at this time, and now you're beginning to settle in because you realize you're not coming home anytime soon.
Nope.
So I want to break this next part up into just a couple different parts. One, I want to focus on, obviously, you are in charge of his care. All the medical decisions, dealing with the doctors and the therapists, for people who had given up on him, who did not think he was going to make it.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I was told
Right.
when I got there was, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But he's not going to make it.
He's not going to make it.
He's on this ventilator. And this was a couple of days later, I would say. The head doctor in that ICU said that, he I'm sorry, but he's just not going to make it because he's just too far gone.
Right.
He's going to be a vegetable.
Right.
If he comes through this,
right.
he will be in a vegetative state.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't want to be that way. You wouldn't want him to be that way. And he's never going to walk.
Yeah.
He's never going to talk.
He'll never talk again.
And he's not going to know who you are.
Right. Right.
And I just said to the doctor, thank you so much for being so candid with me.
Right.
I appreciate what you're telling me.
Right.
But I'm going to decline that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so while all this is going on, life is still lifing.
Life is still life.
So you're managing his illness and everything else. You're an entrepreneur. So you're still running a business from California now. And now you have to manage his business and affairs. And so I really want to start with that because that is probably one of the biggest takeaways for me. Having adult children, your kids go and we realize we don't know anything.
Because it's their business.
It's their business. And
they don't want you in it.
They don't want you in it. And we kind of glad not to be in it.
Exactly.
I'll tell you the truth about that.
Exactly.
So how did you begin to put his financial life together? Because you're like, oh, wow, he had an apartment, he had a car, he had car insurance, he had a cell phone. Like what was the priority, Mechelle? Like where did you start? Where did you start?
Well, I think when he was still in ICU, it was August. And so I knew his landlord. And so I went into probably operation mode. That's just me.
Right.
Like, okay, what needs to be done? Okay. And so my thoughts were, okay, he got this apartment. I'm not going to be paying for this apartment. And we don't know what's happening here, but clearly he's not going to be coming back to this apartment.
Right.
At this particular time.
Right.
So what I ended up doing was just, I don't know, just getting the information that I need, like logistically, what needs to happen.
Right.
So while he was in ICU, okay, I talked to the landlord. He even had come down because he was instrumental in helping to get in contact with us.
Okay.
And that's another thing that we have to talk about, too.
That's important,
because that was why we got the call.
Right.
Because of him.
Right.
And he didn't even know anything. He had to kind of figure out what to look for and who to call, and he called his job.
Right.
Jobs are not supposed to give any information.
They can't give it out, right.
So we ended up navigating those waters and getting there. So the first thing I did was let me go and clear out his apartment. I went and rented a storage unit.
Right.
Paid a guy, he did moving to come out of that apartment.
Right.
And the landlord, he knew what was happening.
Right.
So it was like, okay, fine, keep the security deposit. We got to go.
Gotcha.
I just took everything out of that unit immediately.
Right. Because you're going into cost saving mode too.
I'm going in cost saving mode.
Because it's like,
who's going to pay for this?
Who's going to pay for this?
Right. But we'll figure that piece out.
And I'm sure you knew where he lived, so you could put that piece of the puzzle together. But like, how did you find out where he banked in his car insurance? Like, how were you able? Were you able to log on to his accounts? Did you have access? Could he tell you that? Like, how did you do that?
Well, that's another strange conversation there. Well, especially, I'm thank God for my IT background. Okay. And I hate to admit on live that I hacked into his phone.
We had to do a little hacking.
I had to do a little hacking, okay?
Okay.
But I did.
Right.
And so, and I was even surprised myself, like, oh, these skills not gone. No. I got into the phone.
Okay.
Once I got into the phone, then it kind of gave me insight a little bit on, and I knew, the basic stuff, you have to have in life. You got to be paying your rent. You got to have insurance. You work somewhere.
Yeah.
And I got these phone numbers. I went through to figure out who I need to be calling that could give me some insight and access to what was going on. So it was like being in the dark.
Literally
In the dark.
Right.
But the one thing I can say, when you're navigating your life a certain way and you're acquiring certain skills along the way,
right,
nobody can lose you in the forest and you not figure something out.
Yeah. So you were able to be very resourceful, it sounds like. And now when you begin calling these people, whomever all these people are, were people helpful, friendly? Like, were they like, girl, that ain't got nothing to do with me? Like, he still owes us this money. Like, how were you able to negotiate those type of conversations? Meanwhile, you're still running your business. You're caring for a son who they say is not going to make it.
Right.
So how were you able, to have these conversations were people helpful or no?
A little bit of both. Most of the time they were, but one of the things I would say how I was able to do this is by having a good friend named Jini Thornton that can give you a script to say, listen, girl.
This is what you say.
This is what you say.
Absolutely.
Okay? So get you a good friend that can tell you, listen, girl, this is what you say.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I call people, understanding the HIPAA laws, because I was already versed in that, and I would let them know before they tell me, I can't tell you.
Right.
I would tell them, listen, this is who I am. This is the situation. I know that you're unable to do certain things, but how can you help me navigate this?
Right.
And so here's where compassion and kindness, the human part of people, have to actually kick in.
Right.
Well, it doesn't have to, but hopefully, God, it will.
Right. And I'm happy that you mentioned that, because that's where some of the conversations I remember us having, because my goal was really to help you set the priority, because there are certain things that I knew that were urgent, and other things I'm like, girl, if you don't talk to, for example, the credit card company, we'll deal with that later. But I'm like, listen, you're going to be driving his car. We got to make sure that car insurance is paid.
Yes.
Like, we have to solve that mystery. We have to make sure that his health insurance continues to get paid. Like, we need to make sure that his disability insurance is okay. Like, what are the critical things versus the things that we can kind of get to later? Those are the things that you basically laid out, and then we went right down the line. Literally down the list.
Call the insurance people.
Yes.
Talk to the HR people.
Right.
And his job, I have to say, he worked for Yamava out there, the casino. Those people were so awesome.
Right.
The HR person, I was in constant contact with them. They love Tony. So it's good when you're working for people.
For sure.
But then to have a good relationship, at the job, so that they can have some compassion for you as well. And so they were very helpful in without crossing lines, because they have to adhere to rules and regulations as well.
Right.
But they were able to at least help me navigate up to a point and kind of say, this is what you need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing where I just really kind of want to pause right here is just talk about sharing of important information. Because we have these young adults in our lives, and a lot of us, and I'll admit it, I've been that mother too, where I am so glad that they're gone. You know what I mean? Love them.
Yeah.
But this is the chapter that we're in, and not having the information that we need.
Right.
So you need to know your child's employer, not just where they work. Oh, they work for, Coca-Cola. No, who is their boss?
Yeah.
How do you get in touch with HR? It's critical that you know that. You need to know where they bank. You need to know who their car insurance is with.
At least have an idea.
You have to have an idea of that information, because we never know when we have to step into their shoes and be able to run points again, be mommy again. And also it's vice versa. Our children knowing certain information about us.
Yeah.
Because we think that it doesn't go that way. Of course, it has to go both ways. So and we're talking about something so simple as information. Well, I'm not saying that you have to have their login information, because they may not want to share it, and you may not want it, but you have to be able to step in their shoes because the time matters. And I think that was really a part of the conversation. I wanted you to focus on the things that I knew that were urgent, and then we would just kind of get to the other stuff later. Right. I'm like, them other people can wait, but we've got to deal with this right now.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happened. And the other thing was, with Tony, it was navigating, but also with me, I want to mention that because that was another important piece.
Right.
Because fortunately, we were in a virtual situation, so I could still teach, classes from the East Coast. Right. But I had a physical brick and mortar office space.
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
I had just downsized from the larger. I had just upsized.
Right.
COVID came. I downsized. Just signed this lease for this physical brick and mortar space, and then I'm flying out.
And then you literally leave.
And then I leave.
Hold that. I want you to hold that because in our part 2 of the questions, this is where I'm really focused more on you.
Okay.
I want to talk about how we prepared for the discussion with your landlord.
Okay.
Because I'm just like, we're gonna have to reframe this whole conversation with them and not being afraid to ask for what you really want or need.
Yes, absolutely.
So no, I think that's very, very important. Let me see. I want to make sure that I asked you everything. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of pivot just a little bit. I want to read a question that was submitted to us from another parent here locally in Atlanta named Fran. And, we let people know in advance what our topics are.
Okay.
And so Fran is essentially echoing the same thing that we're talking about here. She said, I realized that I have no knowledge of my children's life in ways that are really important. I couldn't tell you who their insurance is with, how they pay their bills, or even if they go to the doctor. Now, she said, that she's connected with the Thank Me Later community, she wants to be more intentional about that. And she wants to know about getting that information and saving that information. And I'm up here as I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about our son, Cameron. I'm like, I don't know who his doctor is. I literally just had that thought. Like, I know his health insurance, I have no idea who his doctor is. Like, I kind of had a little panic moment now. But Fran, and same thing to you, Mechelle, is like, we have got to be intentional with our kids and family members, not just our children, anybody who you may have to step in their shoes. Yeah. Like, think about having that playbook and how much time and energy and effort that saves. Having that critical information on folks. Like, we have to get it, and you should store it however is best for you.
Right.
Whether it's digitally, you got a file somewhere, whatever, but we have to exchange that information. And then we need to tap in with that information. Right. I'd say at least annually, just to kind of do a little checkup, just to see if anything has changed. Because we want to be able to make sure everybody is good and we kind of keep things in the middle of the road.
I agree with that, Jini, and it's one of those situations you have to really think it through because people really feel like I don't want you in my business. Yeah. And so, what I thought about was even with what you do with Black Women Will, that's preparing and having that pink folder. We've talked about that. Right. When someone dies, you go get the folder. Somebody knows to go get it. But what about having a folder? I don't know what color it's going to be, but a folder for when you're still alive.
Absolutely.
That someone can actually get, because most often than none, depending on the relationships, and we have so many different kinds of relationships with family. Right. That you say, well, no, I don't want this person having this. And it doesn't have to be a family member. Right. It could be a best friend. It could be someone that you trust at that moment, or maybe a space that it's in that someone will know if something happened, this is how I can get my hands on it. Right. But I don't know what that will look like just yet. Right. But it has to be that because this is important. Yeah. And you're right.
So we're going to borrow your idea of the different color folder. For Black Women Will. We're certainly going to use that. I'm going to give you credit for it. But I understand what you're saying because people don't realize what the statistics are. You are 4 times more likely to become disabled than you are to die.
Exactly.
So you're 4 times more likely to become sick in your lifetime.
Exactly.
So like what's going to happen here if this is going to happen? Another thing that I wanted to share is stroke is a leading cause of disability. Nearly 800,000 strokes occur in the U.S. every single year. one in 4 adults are going to experience it in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So this is not like some super rare thing that never happens. Like this happens all the time. So you call it stroke, call it heart attack, call it car accidents, call it whatever it is. These are things, these are life moments that happen. So, okay, now, Mommy, I want to focus on you.
And right before you do, I want to say, I want to add to what you just said, it's happening younger and younger.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
Let
important.
me put that out there.
Yeah.
Because we usually think stroke, old folks like me,
right.
older,
right.
Doing something.
Right.
But I want the young people to understand as best they can that, no, this happens at any age.
At any age. He was 38. So before I start focusing on you, because we haven't talked about this, where's Tony now? We haven't talked about what's going on with Tony now. So for the young man who they said he was going to be a vegetable, he wasn't going to, if he lived, he was going to be a vegetable. They did not expect him to live. Kid on a ventilator. So today, 2 years later, he is.
Well, I told him, first of all, you can't down my watch.
Right.
Bring you back and then let you know you cannot down my watch. This is not happening. Okay.
Right.
But we went from there. They had basically, when he came out of ICU, it still was, ma'am, we told you.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
He left the hospital on a ventilator still.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And went to subacute care. And the subacute care place had to handle dialysis, trach, G-tube, all of these things. And so he was there. And I decided every healing modality that I knew to do, that I've been doing all these years with everybody else, I just poured it right into my son.
Right.
And so we did everything. Reflexology, we did the music therapy, we did the prayer, we did the meditation, we did the music, you name it, we did it on a daily basis.
Right.
And I would take him outside. I was there at this place so much, people thought I worked there.
Right.
I could literally go in the closet and get what I needed, go get the chairs, and I would take him outside and let him get sun on his body, and do these things, up, down, and eventually I got an apartment. And when he was released and came in to the apartment with me, we were up, down, we were doing, and he literally took a step February the 22nd of 2023.
Okay. Took his first step. Right.
Okay. And it was to that degree. We had in-home health therapy services to come out and work with him. And then we moved to post-acute therapy, work with him, and preparing to come back. Because eventually, I got a husband here now.
Right, yeah, you had to come back.
Okay, so I was gone for a whole year.
Literally.
Yeah. And preparing him to get on that plane and come back. And we've continued to work, continued to come here and navigate the healthcare system, because it's different in California than it is here. That's the other thing.
That was a whole thing.
Right. As I said, so many components to this story.
Right.
It's just wow. But continue to rehab, continue to pour into him. And then the prayers. Right. That's the other thing. I'm so thankful and grateful for all the people around the world, literally, that has been praying for him, sending him kind words and well wishes, and then really telling him, son, now I could do so far, but now you're going to have to do the work.
So today, he's walking. Obviously, he's talking really well.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Right.
On his computer.
Yeah.
On his phone.
Of course.
Okay. Okay. You talked to him just the other day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, he's doing all those things. And let me tell you, the other day, I came from, I host meditation every Friday. And I was coming from meditation, and I was coming down my street, and it's quite a ways from my house, but I could see this guy, like he was walking, going between my house and the next door neighbor's house. And I'm thinking, who is this, cutting through the yard like that? And as I got closer, it looked like he had a stick in his hand or something, right? And as I got even closer,
it was him.
It was Tony.
Outside walking.
And he's been walking up and down the subdivision with the cane.
Right.
But this time I saw him walking with the cane in his hand.
And not on the ground.
Yeah. Across the grass, which is uneven terrain.
Right.
And so, I stopped and I was just looking. I was like, okay, Mom, do not make a big deal out of this. Do not go outside the car. Oh, my God. Don't do it. I calmed myself. And I could see Tony smiling because he's like, "Oh God, here she is." Right?
She about to be extra.
I didn't. I parked my car.
Yeah.
But I got my phone out.
Right. You had to
went to the window.
Right.
And I started recording it. Right. And I could see him like, okay, she's somewhere.
Right.
Looking at me. I already know this. Right.
Right.
But I was telling him because I'll be fussing at him sometimes. Like, listen.
Right.
Because I can't take him any further now.
He has to do it.
He has to do this.
He's got to do it.
And I'm like, and then I have to be. And I'm learning a lot myself because you are talking to this person like you've always talked to them, but you have to factor in this stroke and this type of stroke, and things are different now. So he's different. I gotta be different.
You gotta be different.
So it's taught me more patience,
right?
Kindness, compassion,
right?
All of the things. Yeah. So it's a real journey, and we're still on it.
So now I want to talk about you, because it's very interesting that you had to pivot immediately and continue your business as you're in California for a year. I want y'all to hear what I'm saying, that she was there for an entire year.
Lived there.
Literally, she lived there. So obviously, thank God the technology existed for you to pivot very quickly, and you figured out how to manage your time with your business, taking care of him and all that. So that seemed to have worked out pretty well for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about this lease, because I remember us being on the journey of this. So when we were talking about it, I remember you just mentioning the landlord, and I'm like, Mechelle, why are you breaking your neck to pay your rent and you're in California for a year? I'm like, we can't do that. We can't do that. I'm like, let's call them and let's tell them what we want, instead of just, because you were trying to make it happen. And I'm like, forget that. No, we're not going to do that.
I know, right?
We're not going to do that. So if you would talk just a little bit about that. And the reason why I want to share that is, in crisis, you're going to have to be very flexible. Yeah. And you may have to pivot, but you need to be very clear on what you can and cannot afford, and stop paying for things that are not a priority. But you don't have to ruin the relationship, though.
And that's the important piece, and that was key for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we had that conversation, I didn't think about it then, but as we're talking about it now, when I talked about the highlighter, getting the highlighter,
right,
that was like a highlighter moment for me.
Right.
Because I'm going to tell you, Jini, I was listening to you,
mm-hmm.
and I was also thinking, this girl crazy. She want me to call these folks and say, listen,
I can't pay the rent.
I can't pay my rent.
Mm-mm.
And I don't know when I'm going to be back.
Right.
I'm thinking, for real.
Right. And I meant it. For real.
Yeah, I know.
And I kept saying,
of your voice.
Like, do you know how much money these people have? Yes. This is not an individual person who owns this building. Like, this is a major corporation.
Yeah.
You're not, people, their kids are still going to eat every single day. They can afford to do this. They can afford to do this. Of course, we're about to ask for this. So you asked, and then what happened?
Shaking and scared and trembling, I did. Because I was like, oh, my God.
Right.
I'm thinking, all right, Mechelle, get some backbone.
I'm like, girl, no, we're about to ask for this.
I called.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I don't even know how to frame this, right? I'm going to be stuttering and stammering, and I'm going to sound like, like I'm not even going to even sound professional when I do this, right?
Right.
I said, okay, you know what? Just challenge Jini's spirit and do it. Mm-hmm. And I did.
Mm-hmm.
And surprisingly,
mm-hmm.
it went easy,
mm-hmm.
quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
And I hadn't thought about, it was the perspective thing that I didn't apply to my own self.
Right.
I'm like, I've been a tenant at this place since 2013.
Absolutely.
I've never been late.
Absolutely.
Ever with my rent.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, I've not only been a tenant there for that length of time, I've expanded with them.
Absolutely.
So I had a track record. I didn't even take that in consideration.
Yes.
And then when I called and talked and told, it was like, okay, what do you need?
Yeah.
Then it was like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking me, how much time do you need?
How much time do you need? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I felt that you were going to get that was because, again, they're a major corporation, but they're still human beings.
Yeah.
And I knew how long that you had been there, and we had nothing to lose by asking.
Right.
But to see you try to maneuver and handle what you were handling and make sure everything was okay in Atlanta, that was not sustainable. And the reason why I'm saying that to all of you out there is you have to know what is urgent, what is important, and what we're going to have to just deal away with. One other thing I want to go back to Tony about real quick before we get ready to wrap up is I know how hard you were working to protect his credit.
Yeah.
You were desperately working hard. So you were paying certain things. And I was like, listen, if it's not on this list right here, we're not paying it right now. We're going to call them folk up. And we're just going to say, this is what's happening because it was real. It wasn't a lie. We cannot do this right now. And we will have to pick this back up later. Because that was creating too much stress for you to take care of him, run your business, run your household that you still had to run. And then we can't be worried about his MasterCard or Visa right now. We can't do that right now. So I'm not saying we can't come back to it ever, but we can't handle that right now. But we have to be okay to know that.
Yeah.
And hopefully, whether people have paid consistently or not, the math just wasn't mathing.
Math wasn't mathing.
It wasn't mathing. So it's like, let's just ask for what we want, or we're just going to have to tell people how this is going to have to be for right now. And we're just not going to assign any emotion to it. We're just going to handle the business.
That part.
Yeah. We're not going to assign any emotion
that part.
to it.
I had to pick the emotion that I needed to assign to that or not assign anything at all. And that was an important piece because that was another step of boldness to say, pick up the phone, call. And then on top of that, I'm calling for someone else, not myself.
Right.
And that was the other little caveat to that was I'm having to speak on his behalf.
Right.
And tell them what's going to happen or not going to happen and then how to act. That was the thing. And so that all that was big.
Right.
It played a big part in navigating those waters.
For sure.
And that's one of those, not thank me later, I thank you now. Okay? I thank you now because it really took a big weight off.
For sure.
It just took a big weight off to be able to say, because I'm thinking, when you start trying to do the right thing, then you're thinking, oh my God, I don't want this to fall through the crack and that fall through the crack. And you're like, no, let that fall. There's a crack. That's supposed to go through.
Absolutely. And sometimes it has to happen that way, but it is just a matter of priority if the math is not mathing.
Right.
And that's the thing that I want everybody to know, that if you're going through one of these life situations, you may have to kind of stop and regroup, and be okay with having conversations. And just talking to you now, I'm going to have to do some specific content on that so I can empower people the way that I empowered you. This is what you say. This is what you ask for. Know what you want. Know what you can afford. Know what your history has been with these folks.
Right.
Yep. And then just say what you want because, the old saying, you cannot get blood out of a turnip. If you can't afford it, you just cannot afford it.
Exactly.
But we're not going to be stressed about that, though.
Right.
Thank you so much.
And you don't have
for
to be
sharing
angry.
that. No.
When you talk to these people, you're just telling them, this is the situation. This is what I can do. They have a job to convince you otherwise.
Absolutely.
But you have a job to say, this is what it is, and this is what's happening. Even with his car, remember?
Yeah.
I let his car go back.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had to use that car up to almost time for us to leave.
Let them come and get it. They can have it.
They can have it.
They can. What else you gonna do?
Yeah.
You're not shipping it to Georgia.
Right.
Let them. They're just gonna have to take that.
And I was trying to figure that piece out.
Yeah. No.
And it's like, nope. Let them have it.
Let them just take that car back.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just, again, it's just that business mindset. We got to release that emotion and just focus on the business at hand that we have to take care
and
of.
gain freedom.
Yeah. And gain free. Thank you.
Because that's what happened.
Right.
You gain the freedom of being able to be free enough to say, this is what I need, this is what I don't. I can't carry any extra luggage.
Right.
Because you pay for those extra bags.
Absolutely. And as we get ready to wrap, this has been, thank you for sharing this story. This is going to help a lot of people. This is going to help a lot of people who are going to experience a crisis. Because it happens every single day.
It happens.
Literally every single day. But if you know how to get through it, it does not have to turn your whole life upside down, though.
Yeah, you can come out unsinged. Yeah. People like, I don't look like you've been through this or that. But no, it just made the route. And I just think I'm so grateful and thankful and hold deep appreciation for you and the whole Thank Me Later community, because not only just with this crisis, but
Right.
just little nuggets of information that I've been able to just feed myself.
Right.
And that's the thing. You got to find sustainable food,
Right.
and not just the physical food, but
Right.
this is sustainable food here.
Right.
Yeah.
So as we wrap, when I think about you being a mindset expert, and I know we collaborated, you were one of the contributing writers to, Take Care of Your Damn Self. Because this is about getting our young adults off of our parent payroll. How were you able to take care of yourself personally and financially during this time? Because I know it's easy as a parent, to put all of your attention to your child, no matter their age. But how were you able still to keep yourself as a priority?
Well, I think that I've been holding that vein of thought for quite some time.
Okay.
Because it goes back to the line that I gave you at the beginning. If you can keep your head,
Right.
you got to know what actually allows you to keep your head. And that's physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, and socially.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to lose my head
Love
for
that.
anyone.
Love that.
Not husband, not children, not grandbabies, anyone. I will not lose my head. And if I need to just sit and coil in and be still and gather myself, because I can't help them.
Right. If you're a hot mess.
I love my husband, I love my children, I love my grandkids, but I can't do anything for them if I don't keep it together for myself.
Right.
Period. And so that's something that I'm going to live, by, and just sustain myself on.
Right.
That I must be able to keep my head.
Right. So as we wrap, I want you to say something directly to the audience, so just whatever you are feeling inspired to share or advise. So I'm not even going to give it any more criteria. Just want you to address our audience directly.
What I would say to the audience today is to, when you are listening to this podcast, to go back and replay it so that you can hear some of the nuggets that came through, especially when it comes to health and wellness for yourself. That's part of keeping your head. If you cannot do what you need to do and make a commitment to taking care of your physical self, your mental self, your emotional self, your financial self, and even your social self, it can be detrimental not only to yourself, but to others around you, because somebody will have to step in and fill that gap. And even if that happens outside of, anything that we would do, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to even step in and help you. That's what I would say. Check your blood pressure. Know your numbers. I've heard Jini say this when it comes to her financial advice. If you don't know your numbers, you can't help yourself. Well, on the health and wellness side, if you don't know your numbers, you can't help yourself.
Amen.
Even if you don't do anything about it, know your numbers. And you can say, I made a conscious decision not to do anything about it, but I knew the numbers. That's what I would say.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mechelle.
Yeah.
A couple things before we wrap. So finish this sentence. If you blank, you will thank me later.
Again, I have to say, if you commit to consciousness at every level, physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, and socially, you will thank me later.
And since Thank Me Later is centered around leaving a legacy, what does leaving a legacy mean to you?
What does leaving a legacy mean to me? I believe that living your legacy while you're alive is key. Most often when we think of leaving a legacy is after I die.
After we're gone, right?
But you're creating a legacy every day that you live. And if you commit to taking little steps toward whatever it is that you love, commit to doing that and doing it well, and your legacy is being left.
was being left. I love that. Thank you. So if this video helped you in any shape, form, or fashion, we want you to make sure that you like it, you share, you comment, and please subscribe to the Thank Me Later show with Jini. Just want to reiterate a couple of resources. You can certainly engage with Mechelle at yogahive.com. You can follow her at Yoga Hive on Instagram as well. So again, you don't have to live in Georgia to be able to tap in with Mechelle. Please connect to our Thank Me Later community at thankmelater.money. And if you need any information, the American Stroke Association, that's stroke.org. Thank you all for tuning in to Thank Me Later show, where we will help you master your money and transform your life. You can learn more about us at thankmelatershow.com. And of course, you can follow us on social media at TML Money and at Jini Thornton. Thank y'all for tuning in again.